Family, welcome to the beginning of the end of Animal Farm. It has been a lovely, deep journey. First of all, I want to say rest in peace to Ozzy Osbourne. Definitely rest in peace to Ozzy. Uh, Credited as being one of the founders of metal. Um, and in the chat, give me uh, maybe a couple of Ozzy songs that we should cover. Definitely a legend. Definitely a legend. So our thoughts and prayers go out to his family. Um, I love his wife too. She's hilarious. Their whole family's hilarious. Sharon, guys. So here we are in chapter 10 of Animal Farm. Definitely like, share, subscribe, guys. Our Discord is going crazy. Look at what they're doing to me in the Discord. Look what they have done to me in the Discord with the apples and the bucket of milk and everything. They have the audacity, the unmitigated gall. After all I've done for them, and all I wanted in return was all the apples, all the milk, all the eggs, and all the whiskey I could drink in exchange for the corpses of their exhausted kinsmen. Guys, I love the Discord. It's insane. It's absurd. I love it. Um, yeah, the hat. Yeah, the blame snowball hat. We've had so many one-liners and inside jokes that we had to get the blame snowball hat, and it's great. It's good quality too. I was kind of, I was nervous. I was like, okay, I've never done this type of thing before. They came in. I'm like, yo, I really like the hat. Ron said Mr. B is channeling his inner Napoleon. Okay. All right, guys. Chapter 10, there is a lot to cover, and we want to go, into the after forward as well. Um, First of all, how was everybody's week? Everybody's good. Everyone's helpful, healthy, hopefully. This book really it gives me a conviction about really checking on people and about really urging us to check on each other as opposed to just hearing on the news what's going on in this area. I kind of would love if this community were always at least encouraged to do real checking up on people. And I think that this chapter is really going to set us up for that kind of behavior, right? To really make sure that we're not falling into the traps that this book wants us to strategically avoid. Some things first about chapter 9. Before we go into chapter 10, Boxer is sold to the Knackers in exchange for money to purchase beer, which is so evil that it even surprises Benjamin. Benjamin, who has seen it all. Benjamin, who's, is like, I'm not going to play this game. I'm not going to play the game of the pigs. I'm not going to play the game of the lower animals. I know where all this is headed. Even Benjamin is shocked by the level of depravity that the pigs go to in that instance. Another thing is in chapter 9, truth really begins to become unrecognizable. People are starting to feel like the world is turned upside down and they have no idea what to do. There's kind of a dissonance between what they feel and what they can comprehend. Right. And that's a result of a lot of the propaganda. Someone said, how do I find the Discord? So if anyone can post the link to the Discord in the chat, if not, stick around. I will pin it to the top. Um, And the third thing, the pigs are officially up. Right? They've taken off all the masks, and now Napoleon has made it so that any creature made in the image of Napoleon, now that he has this god complex, uh, any creature that is a pig, only the pigs and dogs now are really eating at all, or are really living, any kind of lifestyle. Joanne, you always come through. Joanne has posted the Discord, and I have just pinned that. Joanne, thank you. So, getting started in chapter 10, the final chapter of Animal Farm. Years passed. The seasons came and went. The short animal lives fled by. A time came when there was no one who remembered the old days before the rebellion, except Clover, Benjamin, Moses the raven, and a number of the pigs. A time came when no one remembered the old days. Remember, right? Re is just again, and then member. As I love to look at etymology for some reason. The member is from memoir, right? To bring to mind again. But John Vervaeke likes to use remember in terms of reestablishing membership. When you remember something, you reestablish your membership in that time period, or in that that place that you're remembering. And the animals are now no longer capable of reestablishing membership in the revolution group, right? They've just kind of normalized this new way of living. And we're about to get into the consequences of that lapse in memory. But look who's left. Um, no one remembered the old days except for this group, except for Clover, Benjamin, Moses the raven, and a number of the pigs. What does Clover represent? Clover represents the working class women of Soviet Russia. Now, why just the working class women? In Soviet Russia, 90% of the purges happened to men. Stalin was taking the men out. He considered them more of a threat. 90% of the purges were men. And so Clover represents working class women of Soviet Russia. You have Benjamin, then, who represents the disillusioned intellectual, the cynic, right? Uh, and then Moses the Raven represents the pacifier of the poor. You might say religion. He's always talking about this magical place in the sky that you go to after you die, right? And then you have a number of the pigs. And of course, the pigs represent the ruling elite. Muriel was dead. Bluebell, Jesse, and Pincher were dead. Jones, too, was dead. He had died in an inebriate's home in another part of the country. Guys, let me ask you this, and those of you who know me know. Those of you who know me know, I'm going to ask you this. Is Jones actually dead? Just put it in the chat. It says here, Jones too was dead. He had died in an inebriate's home, another part of the country. Right? He's dead. No longer a Jones problem, right? What do you guys think? There's no longer a Jones problem. Shanti nailed it immediately. Right? As someone who teaches, I love, Shanti says, Napoleon became Jones. You have to understand, Jones is not gone. Don't attach so much significance to the name. Jones is very well here, right? Remember, yes, Jones was a human being. But what George Orwell wants you to remember is that Jones, more than being a human being, is what? A way of being. Shanti totally gets me. He said it before I said it. Jones is not just a human being. Jones is a way of being. He's a way of treating the animals, a way of treating himself, a way of taking authority, taking power, amassing control. So just because we lose a certain human being or a certain figure doesn't mean that their way of being doesn't permeate, right? Very, very crucial to remember, because it says Jones too was dead. It's like, what does it matter that Jones is dead if his way of being is still there on the farm in good health? Oh, relatively good health, and we'll see. Snowball was forgotten. Boxer was forgotten. Hmm. Is Boxer truly forgotten? Let's hear it in the chat. Is Boxer forgotten? Is Boxer forgotten on the farm? Because it says here, there's the narrator. Boxer was forgotten, right? Boxer, the actual horse, might have been forgotten, but what was Boxer's way of being? I will work harder. Napoleon is always right. That very much lives on, right? So Boxer's way of being has been maintained, right? Boxer the horse it might be gone, right? But it's so interesting how this kind of keeps coming up, where the way of being is left behind for better or worse, and usually for worse. This is something I want you to kind of continue in your mind. It's like, okay, so there's the human being, but then there's the way of being besides, uh, except for the few who had known him. Clover was an old stout mare now, stiff in the joints and with a tendency to rheumy eyes. She was 2 years past the retiring age, but in fact, no animal had ever actually retired. Big surprise there. The talk of setting aside a corner of the pasture for superannuated animals had long since been dropped. Napoleon was now a mature boar of 24 stone. Guys, I looked this up. 24 stone is 336 pounds. Napoleon's a big boar. Napoleon is now 336 pounds. So Napoleon is now a mature boar of 24 stone. Squealer was so fat that he could with difficulty see out of his eyes. Only old Benjamin was much the same as ever, except for being a little grayer about the muzzle, and since Boxer's death, more morose and taciturn than ever. It says that Boxer is more morose and more taciturn than ever. What happened to Benjamin? Remember how Benjamin at first he just wasn't bothered by anything. He's like, "Yeah, I'm not going to play the game here. It doesn't matter." Right? What happened to Benjamin to where now Benjamin is invested emotionally? He's more morose than ever now. Something happened to him. He's no longer this whatever kind of who cares? I'm not going to worry about it. What happened to him? It affected him. Belgan said it affected him. Boxer happened. Dia, I agree. It went too far. He realizes that he could have made a difference, but didn't. That's true too. I think when Benjamin read the side of that truck, he realized diff- he was he was dealing with a different kind of evil than even he had expected. Jennifer says he lost Boxer's hope. Diedrich says regrets his inaction. I think so. Right? You got to understand. Benjamin assumed he knew the rules. Benjamin thought he knew the rules. He thought the rules of the manor farm and animal farm were all the same. Benjamin thought I've seen it all before, right? What Benjamin thought was as long as you're completely loyal, they won't kill you. That's what Benjamin thought the rule was. It's like, okay, it's not going to get better, it's not going to get worse. As long as you're loyal, they're not going to kill you. But who was more loyal than Boxer? Who was more loyal than Boxer? No one. Not even himself. Not even Benjamin. So watching them kill Boxer and sell Boxer to the knackers, right? It blindsided even Benjamin. No one is safe. Bell, I completely agree. There were many more creatures on the farm now, though the increase was not so great as had been expected in earlier years. Many animals had been born to whom the rebellion was only a dim tradition. Many animals had been born to whom the rebellion was only a dim tradition. That to me strikes me as ironic as well, because it seemed that the first wave of animals who were there during the rebellion was only a dim tradition for them too, right? It's not as if they spoke up, when the puppies were taken or when all of these things were happening. So I mean, there's irony layered throughout this. This dim tradition was passed on by word of mouth, and others had been bought who had never heard mention of such a thing before their arrival. The farm possessed 3 horses now, besides Clover. They were fine, upstanding beasts, willing workers and good comrades, but very stupid. None of them proved able to learn the alphabet beyond the letter B. They accepted everything that they were told about the rebellion and the principles of animalism, especially from Clover, for whom they had almost a filial respect, but it was doubtful whether they understood very much of it. Guys, Immanuel Kant would have loved this chapter because uh, Immanuel Kant said, "It is your duty to be informed." Right? He had this list of perfect and imperfect duties, where, in Kantian deontology or duty ethics, the ethics of duty. Uh, do you guys agree? I mean, what if, if Kant were here today, he would be astounded at all the information, all the access to information that we have, and how uninformed we are in spite of our access to information, right? Because the thing is, on one hand, um, if you are not informed, and you have the ability to be informed, aren't you playing a part in creating the conditions necessary for tyranny? Hmm. And it just kind of goes back to, that argument about whether Boxer was a catalyst for evil or whether he was evil, because he was very naive. But is it evil to be ignorant when you don't have to be? Like, is chosen ignorance a problem? Hmm. There's something to think about. None of them proved able to learn the alphabet beyond the letter B. They accepted everything that they were told about the rebellion and the principles of animalism, especially from Clover, from whom they had almost a filial respect, but it was doubtful whether they understood very much of it. The farm was more prosperous now and had better and better organized. It had even been enlarged by 2 fields which had been bought from Mr. Pilkington. The windmill had also been successfully completed at last. Um, so this kind of harkens back to Stalin, because this whole book is about, the Soviet Revolution and how everything went. There were land concessions and economic partnerships with capitalist countries during that time, which was like a spit in the face to those who remembered the revolution. I thought it was 2 legs bad, 4 legs good, you know, and there now seems to be this 6 leg thing going on where you have a 4 legged creature with a 2 legged creature in complete cooperation. But this is something that I want you to maybe try to think about symbolically. It says the windmill had been successfully completed. Hmm. The windmill had been successfully completed. I don't know how I feel about that, because I remember what the windmill was supposed to be, according to Snowball, who was drawing all this up. Remember how excited he was when he was in the flow state, talking about how the windmill should be something that makes the animals' lives easier? It was almost like that was the definition of the windmill, according to the animals. This thing will be complete when it makes our lives easier. So it's like to say that the windmill is complete is just kind of another slap in the face, right? You see how words don't really matter once you empty them of meaning? It's something that started to bug me, and look, I am a religious guy, but it's something that started to bug me about church, is that church was supposed to be a place of one another's, right? It's like the writings of Paul were like, pray for one another, feed one another, break bread with one another, um, consult with one another, promote to good works one another. All these one another, one another, one another. And then, a lot of times when I would go into churches, you just kind of sit there and look forward and listen to someone give a heralding and then leave. It's like, what happened to all the one anothering? It doesn't really matter if you say the church has been built if what happens inside it wasn't the intent in the beginning. So it's just, all of this language has to really hit you kind of different. It says the windmill has been complete. So what? What is the windmill for? What was it supposed to be for? Well, it says the windmill had been successfully completed at last, and the farm possessed a threshing machine and a hay elevator of its own, and various new buildings had been added to it. Whymper had bought himself a dog cart. The windmill, however, had not after all been used for generating electrical power. It was used for milling corn and brought in a handsome money profit. The animals were hard at work building yet another windmill. When that one was finished, so it was said, the dynamos would be installed. But the luxuries of which Snowball had once taught the animals to dream, the stalls with electrical light and hot and cold water and the 3-day week, were no longer even talked about. Napoleon had denounced such ideas as contrary to the spirit of animalism. The truest happiness, he said, lay in working hard and living frugally. Mm, yeah, I think that kind of exposes our narrator here, right? The definition of happiness has changed. And this is a tendency of most tyrants. You'll be able to see this, right? I think Orwell wants you to be able to recognize the tendency of tyrants. The definition of happy has changed. So, yeah, you're happy because happiness now means working hard and living frugally. Work as hard as you can and don't waste my resources. That's what happiness means. So, you're happy as long as you're doing that. Isn't that something? I talked about, I think her name is Yeonmi Park. She escaped North Korea and was giving speeches here in America about how in North Korea they don't have some of the words that we have. Words like, uh, depression or sadness, because how could you be depressed or sad in the communist utopia? They don't use that word. It's meaningless, right? And so you are happy as long as happiness means the thing you're doing. Very, very powerful how language has the capacity to really to trick us and manipulate us. Kim says not being killed equals happy. Right. Absolutely. John, thank you so much for the super chat. I appreciate it. It says thanks Biscuit and all Biscuiteers for giving us nerds a safe space. Beyond that, you don't even realize what you started. Thanks, dude. Hey, I deeply appreciate it. I hope that I never come to the realization of what this thing is, because that's what wisdom is, I think. It's approaching a horizon with just like open waiting expectation, right? I don't even know where this is going, and that keeps it fun for me. If I knew the destination, that's when it becomes boring. Thank you for the super chat. I deeply appreciate it. Um, Somehow it seemed as though the farm had grown richer without making the animals themselves any richer, except, of course, for the pigs and the dogs. Perhaps this was partly because there were so many pigs and so many dogs. Guys, the lower animals have become a slave class. They don't even know it. I forgot who was being interviewed. It was a stand up comic. And guys, follow comedians. I'm going to start doing reactions to more comedians because comedians are like prophets of our time. Like comedians kind of they have this freedom that other people lack. I'm starting to do some Bo Burnham reactions, and I'm just looking at like his comedy is telling us so much. There has to be more comedy reactions. No, it was I know who the comic was, Tim Dillon. Tim Dillon, he was just like, "Look, the world is going to end and, we're not even gonna know it. We're going to be enslaved and we're not even gonna realize it because there'll still be delivery pizza and there'll still be Netflix and you'll still have your little trinkets and, you know, and then you'll just know that you're not allowed to go outside between 5 a.m. and 6 p.m. because the ruling elite are doing their thing. And but when you're inside, you'll have all of your little trinkets that you can play with, and they'll just slowly put you in this. You won't even realize it. It won't even be a big deal to you. You won't even know you're a slave. I'm telling you, the comics have something deep to say if you're willing to. I'm going to do a whole series probably. I'm just going to start doing some reactions to comedians and see how you guys feel about it. Robin Williams for sure. George Carlin. Oh my gosh. I'm not ready for George Carlin. George Carlin is one of the goats. I think the spirit of George Carlin is now in Dave Chappelle. Right? The people who have like deep, deep insights and almost prophetic things to say. But I digress. I don't want to get too far away from the point. Uh, Somehow it seemed as though the farm had grown richer without making any of the animals of themselves richer, except, of course, for the pigs and the dogs. Perhaps this was partly because there were so many pigs and so many dogs. It was not that these creatures didn't work after their fashion. There was, as Squealer was never tired of explaining, endless work in the supervision and organization of the farm. Much of this work was of a kind that the other animals were too ignorant to understand. For example, Squealer told them that the pigs had to extend enormous labors every day upon mysterious things called files, reports, minutes, and memoranda. These were large sheets of paper which had to be closely covered with writing, and as soon as they were so covered, they were burnt in the furnace. This was of the highest importance for the welfare of the farm, Squealer said. But still, neither pigs nor dogs nor produced any but still neither pigs nor dogs produced any food by their own labor, and there were very many of them, and their appetites were always good. As for the others, their life, so far as they knew, was as it had always been. They were generally hungry and slept on straw. They drank from the pool. They labored in the fields. In winter, they were troubled by the cold, and in summer by the flies. Sometimes the older ones among them racked their dim memories and tried to determine whether in the earlier days of the rebellion, when Joan's expulsion was still recent, things had been better or worse than now. They couldn't remember. It says that they couldn't remember, but what use would it be at this point if they could remember? I mean, remember what happened to the rememberers. They were taken out. They were dragged before Napoleon and slaughtered by the dogs. And then a trauma, that everyone else has are traumatized now. And so now they become more sleepless. And then when you add that sleeplessness to the fact that they're malnourished, now they just become like walking zombies, which are just, open cases for propaganda. They could not remember. There was nothing with which they could compare their present lives. They had nothing to go on except Squealer's list of figures. Now, this one was pretty important to me, right? There was nothing to compare their present lives to except for Squealer's list of figures. What that means, I think, is that they lack an internal compass, and as a result of that internal compass not working, now they need an external one. When your intuition can't inform you, you now need some external list of rules. And that's exactly what a tyrant wants, for someone's intuition to stop working and to train you to look to Squealer when you have some intuition that you don't understand. How many people just get this feeling that, something is wrong, something's off. And then in response to that, they turn on the news And then the news tells them what it is, and they just, "Oh, yeah, that's what it is. It's gotta be this scapegoat that you're pointing to, which is really the cause of my problems." And more than that, we label. Whenever we have a feeling, it's like you have an intense, and I just, I'm gonna be releasing, "That Funny Feeling" by Bo Burnham. Oh my gosh, I did a reaction to that. I haven't uploaded it yet, but it's coming. Uh, my gosh, right? We have these feelings, and instead of processing them, instead of really thinking like, "Yeah, let me sit with this. Let me figure out what this is." We throw a label on it. It's like, "Okay, yep, that's fear. Yep, that's anger. I'm angry now." And when you put a label on your feeling too fast, you tell yourself what to do about it. And so you stay in these loops where you're not solving your problem, because instead of really investigating what that feeling is and what it has to express, you just throw a label on it and do the same thing you always do when that feeling arises. So this thing with Squealer's list of figures is just really sad, because they're giving over something. And it says, which invariably demonstrated that everything was getting better and better. The animals found the problem insoluble. In any case, they had little time for speculating on such things now. Only old Benjamin professed to remember every detail of his long life, and to know that things never had been, nor ever could be, much better or much worse. Hunger, hardship, and disappointment being, so he said, the unalterable way of life. Hmm. It says, only old Benjamin professed to remember every detail of his long life, and to know that things had never been, nor ever could be, much better or much worse. You know, before that line, it was strange to me that the pigs hadn't killed Benjamin off. I mean, he's an easy enough target. He doesn't seem happy when things are going right. And so I was thinking in my mind, like, why haven't the authorities just killed Benjamin? And it occurs to me now why they've let Benjamin stay around. And it's because Benjamin kind of is calling others to abandon hope. And hope is a very dangerous thing under a dictatorship. They want you to just get used to it and go with the flow. So Benjamin's attitude is pretty helpful for the ruling elite. He says, "Look, Benjamin professed to remember every detail of his long life, and to know that things never had been, nor ever could be, much better or much worse. Hunger, hardship, and disappointment are the unalterable laws of life." That's useful to the tyrant, to have someone who's been around longer than any of the animals telling him, "Yeah, look, I mean, this is just the way it is." Is that evil? It's so difficult because it's not black and white, right? There are no flat characters really in George Orwell's literature. And yet the animals never gave up hope. More, they never lost, even for an instant, their sense of honor and privilege in being members of Animal Farm. They were still the only farm in the whole country and all England owned and operated by animals. Guys, hear me out. Because a lot of us, people in my family, a lot of us think that just because the politician has a certain skin color or a certain sexual orientation or a certain gender, that they have your best interest in mind. I think a part of this book is dedicated to how naive that thinking is. Just because the ruling elite are now animals, like you're an animal, doesn't mean that they have your best interest at heart, right? It's important to see things that really, really matter. And yeah, no, I mean, because the thing is, there are two ditches you could fall in. Yeah, I mean, is it crazy that, the first black president was Barack Obama? Were there other African Americans who may have deserved to be president way before that were kept out because of their skin color? Of course. Have women deserved to be in that role? Of course. So It's good that we're noticing that and calling out that. But at the same time, don't fall into the pit of thinking that just because someone's a female or just because someone is black or Hispanic and uh, that they actually have your interest at heart. It's important to remain vigilant. It's always important to critically think. Not one of them, not even the youngest, not even the newcomers who had been brought from farms 10 or 20 miles away, ever ceased to marvel at that. And when they heard the gun booming and saw the green flag fluttering at the masthead, their hearts swelled with imperishable pride, and the talk turned always towards the old heroic days, the expulsion of Jones, the writing of the Seven Commandments, the great battles in which the human invaders had been defeated. None of the old dreams had been abandoned. The republic of the animals which Major had foretold when the green fields of England should be untrodden by human feet, which was still believed. Someday it was coming. It might not be soon. It might not be within the lifetime of any animal now living, but still it was coming. Even the tune of Beasts of England was perhaps hummed secretly here and there. Here's what's difficult about this part: delayed gratification is virtuous. Uh, to go into something knowing, hey, I'm going to have to put in a lot of hard work. When you go to the gym and you try to get physically fit, when you go on a diet, that's delayed gratification, and you're saying there's going to be something in the future. I'm doing something difficult right now because I'm hoping for something in the future. So delayed gratification is a good thing, but how do we know when someone isn't just using delayed gratification to become an authority and a tyrant over us? Because not, it's like it is a tool of the tyrant to say, look, I know it's hard now, but just, keep following me, keep giving me all your stuff. And I think maybe at least that's one of the keys. That's one of the differences. That's one of the ways we can notice who are the tyrants and who are the authentic leaders. Are they struggling with you? Think about this. Martin Luther King, right? Martin Luther King, he wasn't just sitting on top of his throne giving orders from a command center saying, "Oh yeah, pie in the sky when you die." He was right there marching in the streets having bricks thrown at him, right? Eventually he was touched, he was assassinated. He was right there with the people. People like Gandhi, people like Jesus too. Who didn't say, "Hey, you know what? Build me a palace, and I'm going to sit on a throne, and I'm going to, do all these things." Gigi says, nowadays that has become a rare thing. John, I appreciate the super chat. He says, just so you know, Biscuit, you bring people together. Uh, love you, Dia. Um, thank you so much. And I really think, I don't even think that it's me bringing all of us together. I think it's the ideas. I think that we're all just this one big thing. I tend to think of people who have similar ideas as one kind of big organism that's kind of finding each other in order to do our thing. I'm an idealist, So, thank you so much for that super chat, guys. All the super chats deeply help because I don't want to monetize this so that you're hit with commercials all the time. And so this is free. But if you can, definitely the super chats are very helpful for this continuing if you're enjoying it. Thanks so much. Um, but it might not be soon, might not be within a lifetime of the animal now living, but still it was coming. Even the tune of Beast of England was perhaps hummed secretly here and there. At any rate, it was a fact that every animal on the farm knew it, though no one would have dared to sing it out loud. Hmm. Guys, Beasts of England was banned a long time ago. They're not allowed to sing it. And it's interesting that Beast of England wasn't forgotten, though it says Boxer was forgotten. Boxer was alive when Beast of England was banned. So it's fascinating that they remember Beast of England, even though they don't remember Boxer. There's a book called Pedagogy of the Oppressed by Paulo Freire, one of the first books that I recommended. I think I recommended it on the Black Pegasus channel. And I am going to have a book list coming out that, my recommended books. Um, but in Pedagogy of the Oppressed, they're saying this is core to our nature, right? Freedom is core to who we are. You can't remove it from us. Hence the slave rebellions, the Toussaint Louverture rebellion in Haiti. All of the little slave skirmishes that the people you 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 cannot remove that from people. It's just somewhere hidden in their core. That's the reason the propaganda has to continue. It has to get worse. It has to become more impressive and more oppressive. And so I think that maybe that's what George Orwell means by saying they remember the Beast of England song. They remember it in their soul. It's a part of who and what they are. I mean, you can remove what someone has all day, but what they are is going to continue trying to emerge. It might be that their lives were hard and not all of their hopes had been fulfilled, but they were conscious that they were not as other animals. If they went hungry, it was not from feeding tyrannical beings. I'm sorry, it says not from feeding tyrannical human beings. See what I did there? They're feeding tyrannical beings, but they're pleased. Like, at least it's not humans, right? If they worked hard, at least they worked for themselves. No creature among them went upon two legs. No creature called any other creature master. All animals were equal. No creature called any other creature master. They're calling him leader. In some instances, in certain songs, they're calling him father. Okay, thank you so much for the $10 super chat. It means a lot. I'm going to read that afterwards. Guys, when the sheep say two legs good, two legs bad, four legs good, two legs bad, four legs good, this chant, are are you appropriately convicted by that? Because some of us have made it a pattern in our lives to say blue good, red bad, or red good, blue bad, right? Um, and it's very important for us not to be like the sheep in this book, but to truly investigate who we're dealing with and investigate the trauma in the lives of the people that we are discounting or but I just don't want to be. It's almost a problem with labeling yourself in general. I was talking to a friend of mine and I was saying, hey, you label yourself a lot. It's like, I'm this, I'm that, I'm one of these, I'm one of that. You're identifying with so many things that it's almost like you put a artificial boundary on what you're allowed to think. Even me, right? I call myself a Christian, right? And the more that I say that, or the more circumstances that I repeat that in, I'm like, okay, I understand. I pull from Jesus, a lot as a provider of wisdom. I pull from the biblical wisdom tradition. But does that change what I'm allowed to see, or the insights that I'm allowed to glean? And so, one day in early summer, Squealer ordered the sheep to follow him and led him out to a piece of waste ground at the other end of the farm, which had become overgrown with birch saplings. The sheep spent the whole day there, browsing at the leaves under Squealer's supervision. In the evening, he returned to the farmhouse himself, but, as it was warm weather, told the sheep to stay where they were. It ended by their remaining there for a whole week, during which time the other animals saw nothing of them. Squealer was with them for the greater part of every day. He was, he said, teaching them to sing a new song, for which privacy was needed. Their way back to the farm buildings, sorry, it was just after the sheep had returned on a pleasant evening when the animals had finished work and were making their way back to the farm buildings, that the terrified neighing of a horse sounded from the yard. Startled, the animals stopped in their tracks. It was Clover's voice. She neighed again, and all the animals broke into a gallop and rushed into the yard. Then they saw what Clover had seen. It was a pig walking on. Yes, it was Squealer, a little awkwardly, as though not quite used to supporting his considerable bulk in that position, but with perfect balance. He was strolling across the yard, and a moment later, out from the door of the farmhouse came a long file of pigs, all walking on their hind legs. Mm. So now the pigs are on two legs. And this is one thing that all of the animals have to remember. The pigs are all on two legs now. Isn't it funny? And this is one of the reasons that Pedagogy of the Oppressed has to be on our reading list. It's like half the size of this book. It's almost like a pamphlet. It's really small. But in Pedagogy of the Oppressed, Paulo Freire is saying that the oppressor himself has a warped sense of identity, right? It's not even good for a pig to walk on. I mean, of course, a pig couldn't really do this, right? And so these pigs accomplishing this hind leg walking aren't even doing anything which is good for themselves, right? So the oppressor wants to identify with whatever oppressed them, and it's not good for them. It's really interesting. Some did it better than the others. One or two were even a trifle unsteady and looked as though they would have liked the support of a stick. But every one of them made his way round the yard successfully. And finally, there was a tremendous baying of dogs and a shrill crowing from the black cockerel, and out came Napoleon himself, magically upright, majestically upright, casting haughty glances from side to side, and with his dogs gambolling around him. He carried a whip in his trotter. There was a deadly silence. Amazed, terrified, huddling together, the animals watched the long line of pigs marching slowly round the yard. It was as though the world had turned upside down. It says it was as though the world had turned upside down. As though is doing a lot of work here, right? Because remember, there's a dissonance between their feelings and their understandings. This is how cognitive dissonance works. It's like you feel that this is deeply wrong, that this is evil, that some tragedy has happened, right? But then what your brain is telling you in order to conserve free energy and not just be introduced to like chaos and drama, your brain is telling you, well, Napoleon is always right. And he's kind of this God figure. And, trusting him is the only reason we're not back in the hands of Jones. You start confabulating, right? And so this dissonance is present and they're just kind of shocked into stillness. It's really sad because it reminds me of other circumstances where it's like you'll hear about, someone being, you know, uh verbally abused by someone who they thought loved them. And then the verbal abuse becomes physical abuse. And then you're just kind of stunned with this dissonance because you feel like you're in danger, but your brain is saying, "Oh, he loves me. It's my fault. I must have done something wrong to cause this." Right? And then you're just kind of frozen. Even in the cult leader Jim Jones, when he passed out that poison, the survivors talk about being like frozen in a state of cognitive dissonance. We're just like, wait a second, he loves us so much. Why is he poisoning us? Like he loves us. Why is he doing this? And you're just kind of stuck and you have this decision to make. Like, do I take on board the fact that I've been taken advantage of this whole time and have dedicated my entire life, sometimes years and years of my life, to what's ultimately a sham, right? It's just a crazy thing. It's very, very difficult to deal with and to go through. Then there came a moment when the first shock had worn off, And when, in spite of everything, in spite of their terror of the dogs and of the habit developed through the long years of never complaining, never criticizing, no matter what happened, they might have uttered some word of protest. But just at that moment, as though at a signal, all the sheep burst out into a tremendous bleating of four legs good, two legs better. Four legs good, two legs better. Four legs good, two legs better. What's fascinating is that the tyrant wants you to internalize your own inferiority so that they don't have to work as hard. If they can teach you to internalize your own inferiority, that makes everything so much easier. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of like the legend of Willie Lynch or Willie Lynch syndrome. Willie Lynch was supposedly a Southern slaver during the transatlantic slave trade who taught other slavers how to properly maintain their slaves because, slaves were rebelling and sometimes they would fight back. And some, there's like a whole bunch of craziness happening with people who didn't know how to properly keep slaves. And so Willie Lynch would teach slavers how to do this. And a part of the making of a slave or the Willie Lynch letters that got sent out were about how to teach the slaves to internalize their own inferiority, right? And there were lessons taught about how you separate the man from not only his wife and children, but you abuse this man in front of the woman so that she teaches her children to honor you more than their father, right? Internalized inferiority so that she can make more slaves and you don't have to do so much work. It's just a cycle that continues. Um, really, really scary psychological stuff. It says it went on for 5 minutes without stopping, and by the time the sheep had quieted down, the chance to utter any protest had passed, for the pigs had marched back into the farmhouse. That, of course, goes back to Stalin, right? Some of the party members wanted to speak out against Stalin. There were certain party members that wanted to speak out against Hitler, but Hitler would make things very loud, right? He would fill things with distractions, whether that's big marching processions, big parades. You know, there was always something to distract you from what was really going on. And this, I love that this kind of brings this full circle back to the artist Ren. Ren was one of the artists who inspired this book club. And this part kind of reminds me, it's like, Ren is somebody who can put the truth into entertainment. So it's like there are ways to be entertained without necessarily being entertained by garbage. We all like the garbage sometimes, but it's like what I appreciate about an artist like Rin is that he's like extremely talented while having so much substance, right? But beware of distractions. Benjamin felt a nose nuzzling at his shoulder. He looked round. It was Clover. Her old eyes looked dimmer than ever. Without saying anything, she tugged gently at his mane and led him round to the end of the big barn, where the 7 commandments were written. For a minute or two, they stood gazing at the tattered wall with its white lettering. My sight is failing, she said finally. Even when I was young, I could not have read what was written there. But it appears to me that the wall looks different. Are the 7 commandments the same as they used to be, Benjamin? For once, Benjamin consented to break his rule, and he read out to her what was written on the wall. There was nothing there now except a single commandment. It ran, all animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than others. I have a question, and I want to see you correspond with me in the chat. Why didn't Benjamin answer her question? I'll read her question again. She said, are the 7 commandments the same as they used to be, Benjamin? That's her question. His response is, all animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than others. He read the law, but he didn't answer the question. Are the commandments are is it the same as it used to be? Right? Am I crazy? That's what she's asking. She's like, am I losing my mind, or are we being betrayed here? Like, have things changed? That's what she's asking Benjamin. She's not asking him to read it. She's saying, is something funny happening here? Right? Really interesting, Benjamin's response, because he reads it, but he doesn't tell her the truth. Yeah, they changed it. They change it whenever they want. And the reason they change it is because they want to amass power to themselves and keep us confused. Mel says he would be punished. Grumpy says, how can some be more equal than others? Equal is equal. Absolutely. Shanti says, trying to make her think for herself. I don't know. Why didn't Benjamin answer her question? Think about this. How ashamed does Benjamin feel for staying quiet in the midst of all this, with how bad things have become? If Benjamin admits to her that things have changed and he could read this whole time and he let everything happen with Boxer and with, all of the rules changing because he didn't know it would quite get this bad, right? It's difficult to admit all that. And so he just says, yeah, here's what it says. It says all animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than others. But what she's asking him is, have things changed? Are we being duped? Another reason he may not have answered her question the way that she asked it is because he might fear causing deeper despair. Right? What's going to come of it if he says, "Yeah, you know what? They're they're lying to us. They're changing the laws every couple of days just to suit their private interests." What would that do except for add another layer of despair? Look, the beginning of this chapter said their lives are already short. Their lives are fleeting. They're malnourished. They're overworking. All this would do is add a layer of fear. Maureen says Benjamin is saying he's seen it all before. Right. He said, or sent to the knackers along with Boxer. For sure. I mean, imagine, he says maybe he can't face the truth. Their life is so fragile. Why make it worse? Super. Yeah. That's, you know, here's the consequence of Benjamin not answering her question. Here's the consequence. It says, after that, it did not seem strange when the next day the pigs who were supervising the work of the farm all carried whips in their trotters. It did not seem strange to learn that the pigs had brought themselves a wireless set, were arranging to install a telephone, and had taken out subscriptions to John Bell, Titbits, and the Daily Mirror. It did not seem strange when Napoleon was seen strolling in the farmhouse garden with a pipe in his mouth. No, not even when the pigs took Mr. Jones's clothes out of the wardrobes and put them on. Napoleon himself appearing in a black coat, rat catcher breeches, and leather leggings, while his favorite sow appeared in the water silk dress which Mrs. Jones had been used to wear on Sundays. A week later in the afternoon, a number of dog carts drove up to the farm. A deputation of neighboring farmers had been invited to make a tour of inspection. They were shown all over the farm and expressed great admiration for everything they saw, especially the windmill. The animals were weeding the turnip field. They worked diligently, hardly raising their faces from the ground and not knowing whether to be more frightened of the pigs or of the human visitors. That evening, loud laughter and bursts of singing came from the farmhouse, and suddenly, at the sound of the mingled voices, the animals were stricken with curiosity. What could be happening in there, now that for the first time animals and human beings were meeting on terms of equality? With one accord, they began to creep as quietly as possible into the farmhouse garden. At the gate, they paused, half frightened to go on, but Clover led the way in. They tiptoed up to the house, and such animals as were tall enough peered in at the dining room window. There, round the long table, sat half a dozen farmers and half a dozen of the more eminent pigs, Napoleon himself occupying the seat of honor at the head of the table. The pigs appeared completely at ease in their chairs. The company had been enjoying a game of cards, but had broken off for the moment, evidently in order to drink a toast. A large jug was circulating, and the mugs were being refilled with beer. No one noticed the wondering faces of the animals that gazed in at the window. There's a couple of things here. I don't think that pigs have much of a digestive enzyme for beer. Uh, the lifestyle that they're living is really only suitable for humans. Like the clothes that they're wearing, the walking upright, the digesting bunches of beer. You know, uh, but something else strange. It says no one noticed the wondering faces of the animals that gazed in at the window. You know something that we call a word that we have for things that you don't notice, which are right there? We call them irrelevant, right? It's like it doesn't matter that they're looking. They're so subjugated at this point. Who cares if they're peering in? That's a scary state. When it doesn't even matter that you're watching, when the corruption is done in the open. I mean, there was a time where Napoleon would have been all over that kind of thing. Like, oh, you're not supposed to watch. You're supposed to be out there. But yeah, there's a certain point where all the masks can just come right off. Mr. Pilkington of Foxwood had stood up, his mug in his hand. In a moment, he said he would ask the present company to drink a toast. But before doing so, there were a few words that he felt it incumbent upon him to say. It was a source of great satisfaction to him, he said, and he was sure to all others present to feel that a long period of mistrust and misunderstanding had now come to an end. There had been a time, not that he or any of the present company had shared such sentiments, but there had been a time when the respected proprietors of Animal Farm had been regarded, he would not say with hospitality, but perhaps with a certain measure of misgiving by their human neighbors. Unfortunate incidents had occurred, mistaken ideas had been current. It had been felt that the existence of a farm owned and operated by pigs was somehow abnormal and was liable to have an unsettling effect in the neighborhood. Too many farmers had assumed without due inquiry that on such a farm a spirit of license and indiscipline would prevail. They had been nervous about the effects upon their own animals, or even upon their human employees, but all such doubts were now dispelled. Today, he and his friends had visited Animal Farm and inspected every inch of it with their own eyes. And what did they find? Not only the most up to date methods, but a discipline and an orderliness which should be an example to all farmers everywhere. He believed that he was right in saying that the lower animals on Animal Farm did more work and received less food than any animals in the country. That kind of hurts because it's like when propaganda is successful, weakness kind of looks like strength, doesn't it? You guys ever heard somebody applauded for like being the first one to the office and the last one to leave? And he says, "Oh, bro, you're always at work. Good job. You're killing it." It's like we kind of applaud things that are a little bit grotesque sometimes. Indeed, he and his fellow visitors today had observed many features which they intended to introduce on their own farms immediately. This is the saddest sentence in chapter 10, in my opinion. In chapter 10, this is probably the worst sentence. It says, "Indeed, he and his fellow visitors today had observed many features which they intended to introduce on their own farms immediately." Guys, you remember when the old Major's goal for this revolution had been to free all the animals on all farms, right? And now, with this reversal, the intention is now to subjugate all animals on all farms and make them work as hard as Boxer. It's a complete 180 of the original intent of the entire movement. He would end his remarks, he said, by emphasizing once again the friendly feelings that subsisted and ought to subsist between Animal Farm and its neighbors. Between pigs and human beings, there was not and there need not be any clash of interests whatever. Their struggles and their difficulties were one. Was not the labor problem the same everywhere? Here it became apparent that Mr. Pilkington was about to spring some carefully prepared witticism on the company, but for a moment he was too overcome by amusement to be able to utter it. After much choking, during which his various chins turned purple, he managed to get it out. "If you have your lower animals to contend with," he said, "we have our lower classes." This bon mot set the table a-roar, and Mr. Pilkington once again congratulated the pigs on the low rations, the long working hours, and the general absence of pampering, which he had observed on Animal Farm. Guys, here's the thing. We talk about a lot about Wren, and Wren has a lot to say about the corporate elite. There is an economist by the name of Richard Wolff. I don't know if you guys are familiar with this guy. I think he teaches at the New School in New York. But he was kind of like a poster boy. He was like Oxford, Cambridge, Harvard, uh, and he's now one of my favorite economists to listen to. And he talks about like how a board of directors works, right? And the board of directors, at the end of every month, they come and they look at their profits, right? And they congratulate each other on taking in more profits while giving less to the people who are working. And that goes down from the employees all the way to the lawyers, right? It's like, how are we going to pay our lawyers less and get from them more? Right? How do we save money on the employers? How do we save money on the managers? Even the customers, right? Like, we're using this particular kind of beef and that's an expensive beef. So let's like mix the beef with some, I don't know, some fake stuff and just make it cheaper. And then we'll charge more for it because we'll call it some new kind of burger, right? How do we make more from the sodas, right? The soda company. Should we switch from Pepsi to Coca-Cola and maybe make them compete? How do we make more while giving less? We want to make more money, we want to give less. We want to make more, give less. And there's kind of a pat on the back for doing this. Guys, what's being said in this part of the book is not super far off from how these board of director meetings are said to work when it comes to large corporations. I want to read it again. Mr. Pilkington once again congratulated the pigs on the low rations, the long working hours, and the general absence of pampering which had been observed on the farm. And now, he said finally, he would ask the company to rise to their feet and make certain that their glasses were full. "Gentlemen," concluded Mr. Pilkington, "gentlemen, I give you a toast to prosperity, to the prosperity of Animal Farm." There was enthusiastic cheering and stamping of feet. Napoleon was so gratified that he left his place and came round the table to clink his mug against Mr. Pilkington's before emptying it. When the cheering had died down, Napoleon, who had remained on his feet, intimated that he too had a few words to say. Like all of Napoleon's speeches, it was short and to the point. He too, he said, was happy that the period of misunderstanding was at an end. For a time, there had been rumors circulated He had reason to think by some malignant enemy that there was something subversive and even revolutionary in the outlook of himself and his colleagues. They had been credited with attempting to stir up rebellion among the animals on the neighboring farms. Nothing could have been further from the truth. Their sole wish now, and in the past, was to live at peace and in normal business relations with their neighbors. This farm, which he had the honor to control, he added, was a cooperative enterprise. The title deeds, which were in his own possession, were owned by the pigs jointly. He did not believe, he said, that any of the old suspicions still lingered, but certain changes had been made recently in the routine of the farm, which should have the effect of promoting confidence still further. Hitherto, the animals on the farm had had a rather foolish custom of addressing one another as comrade. This was to be suppressed. As you see, the book is coming to a close now. We're coming to the end of the book, and all the masks are coming off. Napoleon is saying, "Yeah, we don't need to use this word comrade anymore. This was all just a ruse. This was all just a mask. They're not comrades. They're essentially slaves. They do my bidding, right? So all of that stuff can come off. It was peeling off layer by layer. I mean, at first, autonomy was gone, and then we took the apples, and then we took the eggs, and we took the milk, and now we can just say, you guys aren't. We're not comrades. We're not equals, right? There had also been a very strange custom, whose origin was unknown, of marching every Sunday morning past a boar's skull, which was nailed to a post in the garden. This, too, would be suppressed. And I want to say one more thing about that comrade thing. I find it unfortunate, right? When I was a kid, when I was in elementary school, I wanted to meet the president. Which president? Didn't matter. The president. I just wanted to meet the president. And it was kind of a thing among kids. It's like, yeah, the president is a big deal. If the president came into your classroom, you feel like, whoa, that's the president. It's a big deal. Um, I remember when the two sides had respect for each other, but we're very much in a two legs bad, four legs good kind of mentality, which only works for tyrants. It's we're unable to really see the nuance. Um, and I think that we're seeing a low resolution image of one another. But I digress. This too would be suppressed, and the skull had already been buried. His visitors might have observed too the green flag which flew from the masthead. If so, they would perhaps have noted that the white hoof and horn with which it had previously been marked and now been removed, it would have it would be a plain green flag from now onwards. He had only one criticism, he said, to make of Mr. Pilkington's excellent and neighborly speech. Mr. Pilkington had referred throughout to Animal Farm. He could not, of course, know, for he, Napoleon, was only now for the first time announcing it, that the name Animal Farm had been abolished. Henceforth, the farm was to be known as the Manor Farm, which he believed was its correct and original name. Wow. Revolution without accountability. Gentlemen, concluded Napoleon, I will give you the same toast as before, but in a different form. Fill your glasses to the brim. Gentlemen, here is my toast to the prosperity of the Manor Farm. So essentially, this is a toast to profit and control, which was exactly what the rebellion was against in the first place. There was the same hearty cheering as before, and the mugs were emptied to the dregs. But as the animals outside gazed at the scene, it seemed to them that some strange thing was happening. What was it that had altered in the faces of the pigs? Clover's old dim eyes flitted from one face to another. Some of them had 5 chins, some had 4, some had 3. But what was it that seemed to be melting and changing? It's like they know they've been betrayed, but they don't know how. Remember, there's this dissonance. There's the way they feel, and then there's the way they think. And if your mind and your heart aren't in a similar place, then your meaning making machinery doesn't work. And they're like, I feel like this is off. I feel like everything is upside down, but I know that Napoleon cares about us, and I know that he, did all these things for us in all of these battles. And you know, without him, we wouldn't, I've been singing all these songs about how he's basically the, that's how it works. I wrote down the definition of cognitive dissonance. It's the mental discomfort from two conflicting beliefs. When you're holding two beliefs that are in conflict, that's cognitive dissonance. Then, the applause having come to an end, the company took up their cards and continued the game that had been interrupted, and the animals crept silently away. But they had not gone 20 yards when they stopped short. An uproar of voices was coming from the farmhouse. They rushed back and looked through the window again. Yes, a violent quarrel was in progress. There were shoutings, bangings on the table, sharp, suspicious glances, furious denials. The source of the trouble appeared to be that Napoleon and Mr. Pilkington had each played an ace of spades simultaneously. Round and round we go. Both Mr. Pilkington and Napoleon played an ace of spades, so somebody's cheating. There's no honor amongst thieves, right? And I think this is Orwell telling us, look, even this happy-go-lucky, powling with these two tyrants, even that has no staying power. 12 voices were shouting in anger, and they were all alike. No question now what had happened to the faces of the pigs. The creatures outside looked from pig to man, and from man to pig, and from pig to man again. But already, it was impossible to say which was which. That's the end of chapter 10. You know what kind of crazy, creepy thing is kind of going through my head? It was impossible to say which was which. You remember the lie that they told on Snowball? That Snowball and Jones were in cahoots the whole time? Maybe that was like Napoleon's thing. Napoleon wasn't like much of a, I don't know. Maybe that and maybe that thought is, going a little bit too far. The idea, guys, is that when power is the goal, ideology is just a mask. Another one of the ironies about the end of this book is that do you think the humans have any interest in the pigs? Wasn't what humans were doing to pigs one of the results of the rebellion, right? And yet the pigs think that they've achieved something by kind of getting in there with the humans. Uh, there are a few things that I want to leave you with as we bring Animal Farm to a close. The first thing is check on as many people as you can. And by checking on people, I mean checking on them with respect to the things that these animals were suffering with, which kind of made them commodities, meaning sleep. The people in your lives, the people who you love, whether these are friends, whether these are relatives, number one, check on sleep. And it might seem awkward at first, but a lot of people aren't sleeping because of the way the world is, because of how scary the world is, because of what we see on the news, because we have a 24/7 entertainment machine, right? This, right? We have a 24/7 entertainment machine right in our pocket. So when you check on people, it's okay to ask, "Hey, it's like, how are you sleeping nowadays?" Maybe bring it up as, bring yourself into it so it doesn't seem as awkward. Be like, "Hey, I figure out, I'm getting maybe a little bit less sleep these days. How are you doing with that?" Right? That's one of the ways to check on people because when you're not sleeping well, you kind of, that's one of the ways you can become a commodity. That's one of the ways your brain isn't functioning as well as it could. Number 2, check on people's nourishment. A lot of times we're working so much, and this is the area where I struggle the most. This is an area where it's okay if you want to check on me. You can check on your boy, because this is my area. It's nourishment. Like I was a truck driver. I worked at Halliburton. I've had a lot of jobs where it's just long driving, and you just stop at gas stations and eat like gas station garbage, right? And you're just pulling over at whatever drive-through is there, and when you're not nourished with the right kinds of things, because I mean, I'm a Western, I'm an American, I'm not going to starve, right? But that also has the ability to just make your mind not function right. You just become cravey because instead of eating real food, you're eating edible food like objects. Is my wife's an occupational therapist. She says that's not food. That's an edible food like product. You need to eat real food, right? So in your checking on people, make sure you're checking on nourishment too. Like, hey, it's like, how are you? What are you putting in your body? What are you feeding yourself? And the third thing that you should do to check on people, um, and this is going to be a difficult one. Um, don't watch news that traumatizes you. That's a tough one. Don't watch news that traumatizes others. It's like and you can get a sense of it. It's like, is this news coverage like ever anything except scary stuff? Right? Because if you're watching news articles that just traumatize you and traumatize you and traumatize you, um, then that's going to affect how much you sleep. Right? It's all a cycle. It's all sets you up for some tyrant coming over because you become mentally ill. Right? These animals at the end of this book were all mentally ill from trauma, traumatic news, right? Poor sleep, malnourishment, and poor education. And that's the fourth thing, right? Make sure that the people you love are standing under a cascade of insights. Right? What are you learning? What's new in your life? Right? Ask people that question. Hey, what's new? How's your week been? And the thing is, that what's interesting is we already kind of know that, which is the reason we say, hey, how was your week? How was your weekend? It's not for nothing that we say that. We think it's just a nicety. It's just a thing that people say. But it really is important when you think about it. When you ask somebody, how was your week? What you're really asking them is, are you thriving? In Nicomachean ethics, Nicomachus was the son of Aristotle. And Nicomachean ethics was Nicomachus, his attempt to write down Aristotelian virtue ethics. And there was this phrase, eudaimonia, right? And it means thriving. Are you thriving? Right? And so in your checking on people, which I'm encouraging you to do, as a result of the consequences of not doing that and having us fall into bad sleep, malnourishment, uh, constant trauma, and ignorance, uh, ask people, what are you learning? Right? Making sure that they're having insights and epiphanies once in a while so that the world is always fresh. But guys, thank you for being here throughout this process. I want to get to the supers. Let me see really, really quick. Whoops. There we go. Phenomenal. Greg, welcome as an Insight member. Thank you so much for your support. Drew, welcome as an Insight member. John said, thanks, Biscuit and all Biscuiteers. If you're a biscuiteer, put apples and milk in the chat and whiskey. I need the whiskey too. And I need eggs. I need apples. I need whiskey. I need eggs and I need milk. Science, comrades. Science and tactics. Do it. Uh, John says, and I'm going to read this again. Thanks, Biscuit, all you biscuiteers, for giving us nerds a safe space. Nerds need a safe space. Beyond that, you don't even realize what you started. Thanks, dude. I don't realize. I have no idea. John also says, just so you know, you bring people together. Love you, Dia. Um, he says, live you, Dia. I'm going to just, because that's a typo, I'm just going to take that as John saying, love you dearly to me. That's what I'm going to interpret that as, and no one can stop me. And I love you dearly too, my friend. Okay, D-O, OKC, DOG. $10 super chat. Greatly appreciated. Thank you so much. He says, can we discuss if this story would have been different if Old Major had lived to see the rebellion? Old Major was symbolic of Trotsky. And I believe, do not quote me on this, I think that Trotsky was very suspicious of Stalin and did not want Stalin to gain power. Hang on one second. I'm going to consult the oracle on this. Was Trotsky suspicious of Stalin?
Yes, Leon Trotsky was indeed suspicious of Joseph Stalin. The two were prominent figures in the early Soviet Union, but their relationship quickly deteriorated after the Russian Revolution.
Yeah, so I was right. Trotsky was like, I think there were some things where he was like, do not let Stalin take power, do not trust him, right? So I do think that Old Major was really for the people. And I think Snowball was a Trotskyite, right? Snowball was really for this revolution. He was excited about the windmill. And so I do think that it would have been different. But here's the thing. I don't know if Old Major had enough fight in him, right? Stalin was a brutal killer, you know, and was very sneaky. I mean, he might have just done things and organized and kind of taken Trotsky out anyway, you know. Good question. Thank you so much for uh the gift memberships, 5 gift memberships. Ron, you are goated. Goated. You are goated. Thank you so much for that. Um, all the Insight members and Epiphany members. Uh, Jennifer, thank you so much for the super chat. And there was nothing said. There were no words, just a super chat. Thank you for the love. Cats with the $5 said, thank you for creating this wonderful group. Here's to the next book. I can't wait. Guys, are you kidding me? Are you are you kidding me? This is going to be absolutely absurd. Look at the size difference. It's like 3 times as big. We're really going to go into it. I'm wondering what was written first. I don't even know which one was written first. Put it in the chat. Was 1984 written after Animal Farm? I believe it was. Mel says, I have to go. Thank you for your time. Hope everyone is well and try to work to live. Don't live to work. Mel is goated. She's one of the first. She's one of the original, one of the gang. Apples and milk. She always pays her apples and milk on time. It's never late. Never late with Mel. Shanti, $2 super chat with nothing said there. Love, I appreciate it. It helps the channel so much. Thank you. Ruffs with the $11 super chat with a thank you. Thank you. Everybody who comes into lives like this just reinforces that things like this should be happening in the world. And so you're a part of why it keeps going. I deeply appreciate it. Joanne. First of all, Joanne is goated. Joanne is goated. The Discord, everything that you do, Joanne, I can't thank you enough because I'm a husband, I'm a father. It's like I don't have time to put everything together, and this thing is growing faster than I imagined that it would. And so, people like Joanne stepping up and just making magic happen to where I have kind of some breathing room, it is just invaluable. And I deeply appreciate you. You're the best. She says, "This book club has been a welcome addition to my week. Whilst I'm sad Animal Farm is over, I'm so happy to be following on with 1984. When one book closes, another one opens." Yes, indeed. 1984 is going to take us there, guys. It's going to take us. It's going to take us there. Something else that I need, if you are in the Discord, or if you're not in the Discord, then email me. Leave it in the comments here. I will correspond to these messages. I want. I don't want to monologue. I have a really bad history with monologues, right? I want to talk. I want to dialogue, right? And I'm not getting necessarily as much of that as I want, right? And so I'm going to try to figure out, I'm going to get with Joanne, I'm going to get with some others on how we can structure this where we pause in the book and really talk to each other so that there's just this blossoming effect that happens because I want more of that. John, thank you for the $2.49 super chat. He says, "Dude, I meant DEA, the user." Love you too, though. He ruined it for me, but he gave it back. John is a beast. Love that guy. Member Epiphany member C says, "I feel like a kid again. I want to read it again and again. LOL." Thank you, Mr. Biscuit. Thank you so much. Yeah, I hadn't read Animal Farm since I was a kid either. It was really surreal how it's for today. It's just so amazing. I don't know if George Orwell assumed that that book would be relevant in 2025, as relevant as it is anyway. Um, John, thank you for the membership, Epiphany member. Brenda, I have 1984 ready and waiting. Big brother. Ooh, I'm waiting, but I don't know if I'm ready. Good question. OK says, "Will 1984 be on the other channel?" I was going to put it on the channel The Layman because The Layman, I thought I was confusing the algorithm because there's so much that I want to do. I did The Grand Inquisitor and I put it on this channel and it didn't really do well. And I was like, man, am I confusing the algorithm by doing a book club with the music reactions? Because this is all new. So I got on the phone with Black Pegasus. Shout out to Black Pegasus. A lot of you learned about me through Black Pegasus channel. And I just asked them, I'm like, man, like I have a weird channel. There's a book club, there's rap music reactions, there's rock reactions. And I think the algorithm doesn't really know how to promote the brand. And his suggestion was like, hey, you know what? Even though your channel is kind of taking off, you're still new, which means you can still experiment. You're not at the point where the algorithm has quite figured you out yet. You're only a month and a half in. So you can actually keep the book club right where you have it. And, the algorithm will just kind of learn that you have this kind of quirky, weird thing going on. Don't add too much craziness. But, I'm taking that advice and I'm just saying, okay, let's maybe keep it here, maybe do a little bit more research. But I do believe 1984 is going to stay right here for now. You will be kept abreast of the facts if there are any updates. And guys, one more thing I want to say. I'm going to go back to the live chat now. One thing I want to say too is, guys, I understand a calendar is really going to help all of us out because you can't. It's like, okay, well, randomly on this day on a I get it. It's wild. It's even wild for me. So I'm going to develop a calendar. It will be up by the end of the week. I'll guarantee that. And we'll have a calendar for the 1984 chapters so that you can mark it off on your calendar so that it's not just popping up randomly 24 hours before we go live, right? Because I know a lot of you guys want to be here for the live experience and not necessarily just watch it afterwards. Um, but yeah, book club forever. This book club thing will never end. I'll be 87 years old still doing the book club if you guys don't abandon me for some AI reader, because AI is going to be able to do this far better. If AI takes my job, Shanti says found you through Black P. Yeah, Black P. That's my guy. Did you guys see what was it? The What was that thing on Van Halen's guitar? the 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 whammy bar. Me and Black Pegasus were watching Van Halen, and I was like, man, he has a big whammy bar. I'm telling you, like Black P needs to make merch that says Van Halen has a big whammy bar. That one will go. AI is not a sandwich. Guys, you guys are absolutely out of your minds in the best way possible. Did you see when Ren went live? When on the sunflowers, Vincent's Tale, guys, we had the Vincent's Tale chat lit up with milk and apples. People were so confused. I loved it. People were like, "Yo, what is the milk and the apples for? What's going on?" It was so funny. And then, Rin finally said, "Okay, who's this Mr. Biscuit guy?" He's like, "Yeah, I'll do an interview with a sandwich. I'd love to do an interview with a sandwich." Life doesn't even feel real anymore when something like that happens. Hashtag not a sandwich. Yeah, we did make a not a sandwich shirt. Yeah, that was good. Hashtag not a sandwich. I'm changing the name of the channel to Mr. Not a Sandwich Speaks. Mr. Not a Sandwich Speaks. Guys, we are at the 1 hour and 36-minute mark. And so I'm going to close this down for people who want to watch chapter 10 and who want it to kind of remain a short thing. But look, I'm going to open this back up and hang. So I'm just going to close this one and I'm going to go live again for a second.